Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each Saturday live, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. This is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure, and we're going to be on a wonderful adventure today as we delve into the world of the occult and the esoteric studies of the great Theosophical Society. I've got a great guest coming on in a few minutes, and we're going to get to that just after I make a few quick announcements. I do want you to know that my show is a donation-based show, so therefore I survive on the goodwill of all of you out there who chip into my tip jar each week, and I appreciate your contributions. They certainly keep the great wheel turning, and as a result, I'm able to get great guests on and to sort of push the envelope with all these great expansive topics. I also want to remind you about my newsletter, which comes out every Sunday evening at 5:30. With all the astrology for the week. I do about a 3-minute video that talks about the mundane aspects, sort of like the great big picture of what's going on in the world, and then a breakout of each of the individual signs for the week. And you always want to read your rising sign as well as your sun sign. If you don't know what that is, go to my website, enter your birth information, and it'll tell you what your rising sign is. If you read those two signs together for any week, you're going to get 85% accuracy of the themes that are coming up in your week. So really follow through on that, and it's a great idea to see what there is. I'm always available for readings. My website is either www.chrisflisher.com or www.turningofthewheel.com. So I've got a great guest on today. His name is Gary Lachman. He's the author of numerous books on the occult, including a book about Carl Jung, Rudolf Steiner, Swedenborg, Ouspensky, and Gurdjieff. These are all great names that have populated the world of the esoteric studies. This is sort of that nether world where people are often afraid to put their toes into that pool, but it's a fascinating pool of information and sort of people who are really forward thinkers, who are sort of looking at life through different lenses and different eyes. And Gary has spent a lifetime sort of pursuing these wonderful topics. He's one of the most widely regarded people in this sort of area of the occult and this sort of the mystical, esoteric topics. And his new book has just come out. It's about Madame Petrovna Blavatsky, who is the founding mother of the Theosophical Society, which is sort of a very obscure, but has become since then very popular sort of underground society founded in England based on a collation of lots of different mystical adventures dealing with astrology and numerology and dead people and live people and all sorts of interesting topics. And it's a great pleasure for me to have on Gary Lachman. Gary, welcome to Turning of the Wheel.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Chris.
Yeah, it's great. What a wonderful...
That was quite a build-up to Madame Blavatsky. Let's hope we can stay there. One thing, though, I should point out before any Theosophists send you is that Theosophical Society was founded in New York City, not England. But
that's right. You're right.
Carry on.
You're right about that. Yeah. So interesting. Many people. I know many people who in my realm of the world, and I'm in the same sort of realm, dealing with astrology and sort of the mystics, and this is a realm that I am very familiar with, and I've been reading about, and we refer to her amongst us as HPB because it's easier than trying to say her name, which is very convenient that you did that in your book because I always refer to her that way too. But Madame Blavatsky was this sort of an eccentric woman from Russia who founded sort of was the mother of modern spiritualism. I mean, give us some background on her. She's such a fascinating kind of oddball.
Well, Madame Blavatsky was born in the Ukraine and Russia in 1831. Her first name is Helena Petrovna. Von Hahn was her maiden name. She got Blavatsky when at about 17 or 18 she married Nikifor Blavatsky, who was considered to be a much older man. He was only in his 40s at the time, but back then he would have been considered ancient. And as a young girl, she had strange experiences, and then she also became fascinated with the occult and alchemy and magic and the secret wisdom and that sort of thing, and abandoned her husband only a few weeks into their marriage, and went off on this worldwide search for this ancient knowledge. And 1873, she turns up in New York at the age of 42, having traveled, so she says, already around the world a few times, been to Tibet and India and many other exotic places, and now has a mission given to her by her hidden masters in the Himalayas to bring spiritual wisdom to the godless materialist West.
Mm-hmm.
And she founds the Theosophical Society, as you say, in 1875 in New York with two colleagues, Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, who had, among his many accomplishments, was one of the people to investigate the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and another fellow named William Quan Judge, who was an Irish immigrant who had recently got his passed the bar in New York, and they started the Theosophical Society, and theosophy means the wisdom of the gods. And it was an immediate success, and it was dedicated to the pursuit of this kind of ancient wisdom, also to the study of psychic phenomena, what we would call the paranormal, and also to Blavatsky's notion of a worldwide sort of brotherhood of man,
Mm-hmm.
a very egalitarian, progressive vision for the time.
I think that's a fascinating piece. That's probably one of the things that's less known about her was, we think of her as being this pivotal figure, seminal figure for being the one who sort of put this into the public knowledge. I mean, it was always there in the fringe, but for her to sort of make this statement and to get out there is very good. But I think the idea of that collective pool of the subconscious and sort of all this collective brotherhood that she's talking about really speaks to all of us. And that's sort of what Carl Jung was also working on too, this collective pool where we're all part of this gigantic, where we're all part of the same species. And yet we come from that same, and yet we have such different takes on things. Our views are such different and so disparate.
Yes, well, one of the early things that makes Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society stand out is that they had this eclectic, universal kind of view, and so they studied, the ancient religions and myths and traditions of many different cultures. Everyone was open to join the Theosophical Society, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, or whatever. And she had success in New York. One famous person among many who joined early on was Thomas Edison, who we all know, the light bulb and
absolutely.
so on. And then also she moved to India in the late 1870s and was there for several years and was very successful in India. The Theosophy and the Theosophical Society really took off there. And actually, later on, it did play a part in Indian independence.
Yeah, interesting.
So Blavatsky even had political influence. And then in her last year, she traveled around Europe and wound up spending the last few years of her life in London here. She died not too far from the part of London I live in 1891.
Interesting.
So she packed quite a lot in 60 years. And as you say, if people know about her at all or sort of remember the name, she's sort of seen as this kind of fraudulent kind of guru, an adventurous, charming, a kind of lovable rogue, but in the end kind of, slightly dubious. And whether she was that or not is one question, but she actually had quite a huge impact on the whole cultural and spiritual history of our time.
Yeah, she sort of had that odd spot of trying to be credible at the same time. And I think that she did have a great deal of credibility because she did speak, I think, with a certain amount of authority about a wide range of topics. And she certainly was a collaborative approach to, spirituality by bringing in bits and pieces of all kinds of knowledge, which sort of, brought into realm and a nice, display of ideas.
Yes.
But she also got caught a few times doing some things that people thought were a little bit, and they sort of discredited her in some way, which is unfortunate in a way because her impact really was far larger than those little tiny incidences.
Well, the thing is, she was this huge character, so I think in many ways you can see what happened, her downfall as part of her destiny in a way. It happened while she was in India. It's a rather complicated situation, but
There's nothing easy about her, really.
well, it's just a long story. But basically, she a disgruntled friend and sort of employee of the Theosophical Society claimed that she had several letters written by Blavatsky to her, spelling out this plan. They had to fake all these sort of phenomena, and the phenomena had to do with these people that Blavatsky called the masters, and they communicated with her through what were called the Mahatma letters, and there were these actual letters, envelopes, paper folded in envelopes that would appear out of nowhere in answer to some Blavatsky's questions or questions of some of her followers, and so on and so on. And these things became quite well known, and they were considered miraculous. And Blavatsky was no friend of the Christian missionaries in India at the time. And so this disgruntled employee took these supposed letters, which nobody ever really had a chance to examine. So most Blavatsky scholars considered they were fake themselves, these letters. But she gave these letters to a Christian missionary newspaper who printed a story about them. And so Blavatsky was, after being really regarded as a kind of sacred hero in India, because she's a Western woman who's coming there saying that their culture is better than the West. She wants to learn from them, and all that. At the time when the British were, basically trying to convert everybody into being English subjects and Christians and so on. So in any case, so she has a very high standing, and then this whole scandal comes out about her faking these Mahatma letters and so on. And then also at the same time, shortly after that, the Society for Psychical Research, which had been set up here in London in the early 1880s, sent one of its investigators to check this out all the way to India. And in the end, he basically agreed that these were sort of fake phenomena and so on and so on. And he even accused her of being a Russian spy. And so after that, she was Black Cloud.
Yeah, she sort of lost a little bit of...
basically forced to kind of dissociate herself from the Theosophical Society in order for it to not be tarred with her brush, as it were. And she obviously was still involved with them, but she sort of kind of was on her own.
But, she left her mark nonetheless. And, it's an unfortunate incident. I think what she probably did was, she was in a very difficult spot, I think, given the time and place of history. Spirituality was certainly a topic of common interest, and there was a great groundswell interest in all things metaphysical at the time, sort of an undercurrent of people who were searching for new ways of looking. There was in the United States, there was the Transcendentalists and a lot of other things that are building on this, on sort of the fringe. But I think that she was truly trying to make a name for herself in some ways, and may have taken a chance or two to sort of maybe sensationalize herself or draw some press. The idea is that there's no such thing as bad press. But then again...
Yeah, no. I mean, she certainly knew how to use the press. And, it was all very premeditated in many ways. At the same time, she was a madcap, kind of archetypal crazy guru type. She was sort of like volatile and
very volatile, and a real
uncertain in her behavior. But she also had this mission. And I believe, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying she was a fake. This is what happened.
Right. I understand.
Her career, and there are many defenders who have come. And in fact, the Society for Psychical Research, 100 years later, 100 years after this initial report was drawn up on her, which culminated in saying that she was an imposter. It withdrew this because there were so many flaws in the report, and a variety of different critical readings of it had come out and showing all of its mistakes and so on and so on. And so the Society of Psychical Research, which 100 years earlier had declared that she was a fake, had withdrew this. And so even that report itself is dubious. That's one of the things I try to bring out in the book, is that there's all sort of accumulated kinds of facts or misfacts. I mean, I'm not trying to prove she is or she isn't. It's just I'm just trying to show that one of the problems in trying to write about her is that she has such a complex life. I mean, there's about 6 different versions of every major incident in her life.
I've been reading the book
It reminds me of that old Kurosawa film Rashomon, where there's an incident and then everybody tells it from a different point of view. I think the thing was that, in a way, she even says that she was she was glad to have been considered a fake because she felt that too many people were becoming too cozy with the idea of the masters and all that. And she was saying even people were even naming their dogs after the masters. So
really? Yeah.
she thought it'd become too sort of popular, and I think she took the way of blame. I mean, she talks about that in one of her books, The Voice of Silence, where you take on the sort of the way of blame. You take on all the calumny of the world in order to protect the truth, and so on and so on. So in many ways, she was kind of a martyr, a tragic figure, and that's one of the things I try to bring out too.
Yeah, I think you do it very well, too. I've been reading the book, and it is a fascinating, and she is an odd character. There's no question about it. You certainly get the impression that she has this vein of, she's living in a parallel world almost. I mean, there's one point in time where she's talking about having another person inside of her who she's speaking to, which is sort of this secondary character, which Carl Jung actually had the same sort of situation. He always saw himself as two people, and had this exterior and interior, and I suspect many of us do have an inner voice which sort of, speaks to that same idea, but it's not quite to the extent that she went. She really had, a real belief in this, and it was a fascinating sort of take on things. And I want people to know that we're talking about Madame Blavatsky, and my guest today is Gary Lockman. He's just written a fascinating new book called Madame Blavatsky, The Mother of Modern Spirituality. It's a great book. I've been working my way through it. I'm almost completed, and it's really a great study of there's such an unusual, oddball character person, but who really was way ahead of her time. She was, way ahead of her time in as much as she saw that spirituality in its traditional form really was limited and wasn't really quite enough to satisfy people's real desire for curiosity and meaning. And I think that she pushed that envelope to the extent where people were more willing to look at these things and take them with a great deal of seriousness, especially her travels through India, I think.
Oh, well, that's certainly true. I mean, she came at the right time, and the whole exotic history that she spoke of traveling in India and in Tibet and so on, which at the time was rather remarkable. I mean, India itself would have been remarkable for a single woman to travel through, but to get into Tibet was considered impossible because it was closed off.
And not only was it closed off,
white males, getting through. But at the same time, what I discovered as reading all the material and looking into it was that there's just enough sort of circumstantial evidence to suggest she might have been. And in fact, a few years after the time when she said she was there, you do get quite a few women going in. Alexandra de Bovino is one,
right.
Who's very famous. Wrote a book called Magic and Mystery in Tibet. But even earlier than her, sort of the turn of the century, early 1900s, there's quite a few women getting in. So it's just possible. Although you have to remember, Blavatsky was about 200 pounds most of the time. So the idea of her, hopping up the Tibetan Trail,
it's a little hard to believe.
An inveterate chain smoker.
Yeah.
They say she got through a pound of tobacco a day through roll-ups, which I don't believe she could have got through a pound unless she just rolled the cigarette, lit it, and threw it down.
Yeah.
In some ways, I wonder if she did, because what you just said about her second personality, I think in some way, I say in the book, I suggest, she might have had some ability to slip into this other self, and things like rolling the cigarettes, and she's also later in her career, she's also described as often playing cards, playing solitaire, and I wonder if this kind of purposeful, focused kind of, but not particularly important activity was a way to occupy her conscious mind, her number one, whoever, and then this other part of her was able to kind of manifest.
Well,
so in any case, just bringing that in. But yeah, so just to think Blavatsky, 200 pounds, smoking cigarettes, hopping up the Tibetan Trail seems a bit
it's just
much, So I don't know, but she, there was enough to say that she'd been in India, and also the places that she calls Tibet. There was a kind of Tibet, and there was a kind of the greater Tibet. So there's something like a Ladakh was considered little Tibet.
Right.
It's a neighbor of Tibet. So. And so on, and so, but she certainly traveled through India. She was in India,
Tibet had its problems.
For 5 or 6 years.
Tibet had its problems with regard to the borders, but aside from the borders, there's also just the sheer fact that it's a very difficult place to get to. You're talking about 17,000 feet up in the sky. People who take the train there wake up and they have altitude sickness. You can't imagine a 200-pound chain smoker doing very well in that kind of situation. So there is some problem with that. But then again, she did do some very remarkable things. I mean, she often passed herself off as a man. She had sort of a man-like figure. She probably had manly characteristics, and you can almost imagine her with this deep Russian voice, this kind of brogue almost, chain smoking, rough talking brogue of this bulky woman draped in all these cloths and materials, sort of hidden behind all this. You could easily see her maybe pulling it off, but again, how do you get up those damn hills?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, and back then, the only ways to get there, I mean, there weren't,
is to walk, basically.
I guess you could take a train somewhere to a certain point in India, but then, you have to, it's all, as you say, backpacking and all that, and even getting from Europe to there.
Yeah, very difficult.
Was very, very difficult. So it's.
I'm struck by how much she traveled.
One of her biographers suggests at one point that she had taken this long overland route rather than taking a steamship around.
Mm-hmm.
And this would have taken her an incredibly long time to do. So who knows? But at the same time, she came to the United States, was passed through New York, went across the states in a covered wagon, was in Mexico, was in San Francisco, was in South America, Japan, India already, and all that, the Middle East, Egypt, Constantinople, Eastern Europe. So she really got around, and this in many ways is in keeping with the whole kind of archetype of the magician, because so many of them sort of do this in earlier centuries. Paracelsus, the sort of late Renaissance, early Renaissance alchemist, traveled walking basically all over Europe.
Well, I think it's sort of a rite of passage for them to sort of go out there, and you have to, you can read all you want about mysticism and stuff like that, but there's nothing like really going to the source in order to truly experience it. And I think this probably was her take. What amazes me was, given the times, we're talking 1840, 1850, 1860, around that era, traveling that far under the circumstances as a woman, and you wonder not only the difficulty of the journey, and she had several close calls with death. One time she was on a ship that sank, and she was one of the few people who survived, and she was in wars and received bullet wounds and really lived this rough and tumble kind of life.
And young Italy against the French and the papal.
And you have to ask yourself, what was she doing?
She's this colossal, 19th century Titan character that they don't make them anymore.
They just don't. And you have to wonder, what was she thinking? I mean, in order to do this, she really must have had this, she had this such an unusual, personality and this approach to life. And yet what seems to be an insatiable curiosity to sort of discover and experience everything she possibly could have firsthand. I think that's really the total immersion in these mystical areas, and being in the realm of shamans and being in the realm of the sadhus and all of these unusual characters really sort of enlivened her imagination and allowed her to experience things so that she could be an active messenger and be that sort of guide, that pivotal figure who was able to bring this stuff to the modern world. And I think that there's a real fascination with it, of course, as the world shrinks and we see ourselves able to tap into this on a much broader level now. She actually, there's, believe it or not, because this is a show about astrology and I frequently speak about astrology, there is a real astrological component to what she did at the time and where we are today. There's a real parallel, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And those of you who don't know astrology or don't understand it, doesn't matter. But I can tell you that in 1848, 1850, around that era, Neptune had just entered into Pisces. It was at the early degrees of Pisces, and it takes Neptune about 164 years to go around the whole zodiac wheel, and it is back at that exact spot today. So it's at about 0 degrees, 1 degrees Pisces, and we're seeing again a similar type of consciousness, and it really is about a raising of consciousness. It's about a discovery of esoteric topics. It's about illusion, delusion, fantasy. All of these topics are back, and they're very fresh once again, and she really does become sort of the modern mother. She really is that figure who's getting a certain sense of revival, thanks to people such as yourself, bringing her back into the spotlight in ways that give her a different chance for us to look at her differently, I think. We're seeing
that's
her.
the thing. I mean, my idea is like I'm not a theosophist, and I like and respect her, but I'm not necessarily trying to convince anyone of her, explicit sort of ideas. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize how important she was.
She certainly was.
And also kind of reintroduce her as a living character, rather as where you get where people who are devotees, you have many hagiographies, wonderfully devout sort of books about her and all that, where she does nothing's ever wrong and everything's explained and from day one.
Yeah.
Or you get the kind of standard critical books, which some of them may recognize that she's kind of a lovable rogue and admire her chutzpah.
Yeah.
But in the end, she basically pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to see it some way in between the two. And in a way, I would like people who know nothing about theosophy or nothing about, or just vaguely have some vague idea about the New Age or something like that, to sort of look at this, just to see her as this kind of very important and also eccentric and wonderfully alive, character from this time, and also see the world back then as a different time too, because she's moving around in this milieu in different cities, in Paris, in London, in Cairo, in India, where there's a very vital and alive kind of esoteric underground, a kind of counterculture in a way. We think about the counterculture starting up in the 60s or something like that, and actually there was
it's been around forever.
Something similar that counterculture drew on, from earlier times. I mean, so many of the things that became popular again in the 60s and the 70s and now in the New Age were, come out of this period with her, and all the stuff, because she introduces Eastern mysticism, she introduces Mahayana Buddhism, she reintroduces the Western esoteric tradition, magic and Hermeticism and the Kabbalah and so on. She's also fervently very progressive and liberal, and is fighting two-sided battle against the church.
Yeah, she's done quite a bit
against the rise of science as we know it. This materialist, reductionist, very simplistic kind of vision of science.
Yeah.
And she's fighting against that. And she's also having an in-house war against the spiritualists.
So she's sort of fighting a couple of
phenomena that take place at spiritual, things and seances can be true. I mean, some people do fake, but, are true in themselves. They're not the cause of them.
Yeah.
The origin of them isn't what the spiritualists believe. It isn't the spirits of the dead. It's these kind of elementals or these kind of psychic shells, these remnants of people that are left behind and kind of like astral debris that wants to kind of revitalize itself. And she's a magician.
Yeah, that's a good term.
She starts out as kind of a medium, where she doesn't have any control over these phenomena. But then over a period of time, and she goes through several crises
that's a great term. I love that.
Historian of psychology Henri Ellenberger calls a creative illness.
Yeah, I love that. I love that term of
things, and she comes out and she's able to control these powers of hers.
Right. I love the term astral debris. I think that's very appropriate. My guest today is Gary Lachman. He is the author of Madame Blavatsky, the Mother of Modern Spirituality. It's a great book. It's a great read. It certainly casts her into a different light as far as I'm concerned. I've been following her for many years. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes, so just hang in there. We're going to continue our conversation with Gary Lachman, the author of Madame Blavatsky, the Mother of Modern Spirituality. So hang in there. We'll be right back.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.chrisflisher.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. At www.chrisflisher.com, www.chrisflisher.com, and enter a world of possibility and color. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today. Or call me, 978-264-0668. That's 978-264-0668. www.chrisflisher.com.
In astrology, the sun and moon represent the masculine and feminine principles, while Aries and Libra represent the axis of relationships. Tune in when Chris Flisher and his Aries sun go head-to-head with Deborah Clement and her Libra moon about a subject near and dear to everyone's heart. Relationships. Will the ram run roughshod over a weltering Libra moon, or will the moon's sweet powers of persuasion stop the Aries beast in his tracks? To find out, tune in to a very special presentation of He Says, She Says Astrology with Chris Flisher and Deborah Clement on Turning of the Wheel at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on Contact Talk Radio. He Says, She Says Astrology every fourth Saturday of the month on Chris Flisher's Turning of the Wheel.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name's Chris Flisher. It's a show, as you know, about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And our adventure today is taking us into the hallways of the Theosophists and the great Madame Blavatsky. My guest is Gary Lockman, he has just published a new book called Madame Blavatsky, The Mother of Modern Spirituality, which I've been reading. Now, I've been following Madame Blavatsky, HPB as she's known, for many years, because I was turned on to her when I was very young. I was in my 20s and searching and stuff like that. And I've always had an eye on her and always followed her, always been fascinated by sort of the wild characters and the stories that go around with her. And I have to say that coming away after reading your book, Gary, I don't feel any differently about her, and I don't feel negative about her. I feel very much the way I did. In some ways, I think you cast her in a very nice light where, you're very objective about who she is and where she was. You sort of you show her warts and all, but by the same token, she comes across as being sort of what I still envision her to be, which I'm comforted by. I'm glad that she's got a little bit. I'm glad that she's the eccentric that I see her, that you portray her to be. I'm also glad that she has that touch of, humanity to her, where she does have these foibles and these oddball characteristics. So I think you paint a very real picture of her, which I think, does a great credit to her as an individual, and then puts her in the proper historical context, because she really was a firebrand. I mean, she was out there on the leading edge of this stuff, and we don't really know what motivated her. I mean, what do you think really motivated her?
Well, I mean, she said herself she was in search of the unknown. As a young girl, the story is, although I have to say, so much of what we know of as her childhood is retrospective. I mean,
right.
we know it when she tells us about it later on in life, when she's already become Madame Blavatsky. This is one of the things writing about her. There's a lot of stuff that it's, about her past, but you only know about her past a certain age. When she's telling you about it, there isn't a lot of evidence from the time itself. So in any case, she says that she had these experiences when she was a young girl, sort of what we would call psychic experiences, and, would able to see spirits and talk to these imaginary friends, and even says she had dreams in which this mysterious Hindu would appear, and this would later turn out to be Master M, whom she meets in London. at the age of 20. And then also she discovered her great-grandfather's occult library.
Yes.
And he had been involved in Russian Rosicrucian Freemasonry in the late 18th century, the late 1700s. And along with the alchemical or hermetic and Masonic elements of it, there was also sort of a political agenda.
Yeah.
The Masons themselves had this idea of an egalitarian brotherhood of man and so on. And there was some sort of plan that she had discovered among her great-grandfather's papers, excuse me, describing this kind of, fairly utopian vision of what Europe would be when, the monarchs were gone and so on and so on. And it also spoke of people, these unknown superiors. In this particular branch of Freemasonry, there were these higher-ups that people didn't know the identity of. They were Mr. X, more or less.
Yeah, sort of this secret society.
To them.
Yeah.
And these were men who knew. These were men who had knowledge. They had access to the secrets. And she had this idea of these people being in different, cities and somehow wanting to get to them. And along the way, she met others who were in search as well. Others who were on seekers after the truth, as Gurdjieff called the group that he was hanging out with.
And there's another whole story there.
And so I believe she's sincere when she says this. I mean, I think she really was. And there was a whole milieu. The thing about a lot of the early biographers, they're not really aware of the whole kind of undercurrent that of whatever you want to call it, a kind of search, going on by many different people for this sort of thing. And there were a lot of different esoteric kind of groups that she, got involved with or was a fellow traveler with and learned things from and passed things on and so on and so on. And it was, I think this is really what did motivate her. I think she really did believe this. Now, who the masters were they a figment of her imagination? Was it some kind of myth? Were they some real people that she actually met? I mean, she always talks of them as flesh and blood men that she actually met, who had gained, some mastery of their, their powers of occult knowledge and so on. But they were real people. They weren't these ethereal spirits on the ascended plane. Now that sort of notion of the masters gets picked up after Blavatsky dies with people like Annie Besant and Charles Leadbeater and others and Alice Bailey, and suddenly turns into a different sort of thing. But for her, they were real people that she met on her travels, and they were actually out there, in the world.
Yeah, which, sort of lends itself, obviously it brings credibility to this whole realm. And then, the thing is that we really don't know. We don't really know. I mean, if you're open to possibilities, and that opens the rein to everything in the world being possible. If anything in the world is possible, then you can entertain the ideas of odd things happening to people, depending upon who they are, where they are, and being the antenna for this sort of, and the receptor for this kind of information. We don't really know. I certainly have I've had experiences that I thought were unusual, and I'm sure many people have had experiences that are unusual, and we have to give them a bit of, you have to nod to them and say, wow, this is something I didn't expect to have happen. And we've all had, incidences of synchronicities and all these other sort of what I would consider to be paranormal kinds of events. So for her to be in this, I think it really comes down to, I believe firmly that it's a matter of attuning the antenna, so to speak. And so I think if certain people are attuned to this and open to it and receptive to it, they can actually receive information. And I think she was exceptionally attuned to that, and I think that really speaks to her intelligence and her sense of presence in the world, and being able to be engaged in this and not be afraid of it. Not run and hide from it, but actually thrust herself right into it.
She was after it. That's what she wanted. She wanted to gain this knowledge,
and
then disseminate it, and then use it. For this purpose, to set up this society.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that they
to fulfill in many ways this kind of Masonic vision of this very progressive, democratic, liberal. And one of the funny things is that she's often associated mistakenly with total opposite, with
right.
sort of fascist politics, specifically the Nazis, on the strength that. In the first place, the Theosophical Society used a swastika, but so did Native American Indians,
and so did the Buddhists
2,000 years ago. So it's an ancient symbol.
Right.
But on a slightly less tenuous link is that some of her remarks about race in her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, got picked up and construed for their own purposes by these Aryan groups in the early 1900s in Germany, and by a kind of trickle-down effect, these ideas are claimed to have reached Hitler. But,
that's just
Hitler
spin.
didn't need that kind of stuff to have his argument against the Jews. I mean, he didn't need Madame Blavatsky to not like the Jews. So
he already had his own.
But this is so. It's funny that the reason I even mention this is because I posted some excerpts from the book up on some websites, and some of the response was all about how she was this racist person who was responsible for the Holocaust and all this kind of ridiculous stuff. And the thing is, she's actually very influential in a progressive liberal.
Right, and which
as I said, the person who she influenced a great deal was Gandhi.
Right.
No one ever mentions this. No one ever mentions that Gandhi was invited to meet Madame Blavatsky at a time when he was trying to be Ben Kingsley. He was trying to make himself into a bowler-hatted, umbrella-toting Englishman living in London, and he meets these two theosophists who are reading the Bhagavad Gita in this English translation, and seeing that he's Indian, they assume he knows the Hindi, and says, "Oh, wouldn't it be lovely if we could all read it in the original language?" And he has to admit that he's never read it in any language whatsoever.
Right.
And he's brought to Madame Blavatsky, her open house here in London, and he's introduced to the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishad and all this Hindu literature, the sacred scriptures that he's being taught.
It's it's interesting.
It was just nonsense, and this goes on to have the major effect on his life. And he goes back and says that book became the center of all of my work, and my whole philosophy of nonviolence comes out of the Bhagavad Gita. And he talked about theosophy for the rest of his career. And the day he was assassinated, in his weekly journal, where he wrote an article each week, he wrote about theosophy in there, and he said that theosophy is Hinduism in theory, and Hinduism is theosophy in practice.
And he's
and the thing was, what attracted him was this egalitarian vision, this brotherhood of man vision. He wasn't interested in the occult side of it. He wasn't interested in that at all.
Right.
But this sense of this brotherhood. It's a fraternity.
It's a sense of fairness. It's a sense of equality. It's a sense of equanimity. It's a sense of non-caste systems, which is what he did strive to do, and eventually did succeed doing, or set the stage for in India. But when you think about it, he sort of Blavatsky brought him to Hinduism in a way that the British brought the blues back to America. It sort of is a backdoor way of getting there, but she really showed him back to where his roots were.
That's what they did in India.
A new interest in him.
Colonel Olcott, Blavatsky's companion, he basically, in Ceylon, it's Sri Lanka now, it was called Ceylon then, he brought Buddhism to Buddhists.
Right.
He's a national hero there. There are streets named after him and train stations and things like that, and he's on a stamp, and I think a coin as well. Because at a time when Buddhism was, totally in eclipse there pretty much. It was English missionaries spreading Christianity. He reintroduced Buddhism to these people. He wrote a Buddhist catechism that became his national, textbook on their own religion.
Yeah.
And so they were incredibly influential in returning an indigenous people's culture.
Yeah.
And so again, this is something that this rarely gets mentioned about, this sort of thing. This is a kind of progressive, what we would consider to be, very politically correct kind of political influence or social influence of an esoteric, group. And usually it's the other way around. We're scared of them. We think, there's some kind of
well, there's a lack of knowledge, I think.
Or something.
Yeah, there's a lack of knowledge there. I think one of the criticisms, I guess, that could come to the Theosophists would be that because they're so open to exploration of all things, that they become too large of a topic. It's too big of an umbrella to cover all of the stuff that's there. That the circus tent is too large and it's not refined enough. Now, I personally don't have a problem with that, but I'm wondering what your take is on it after exploring so many different topics. I mean, did they try to reach too far and to incorporate too much, or were they all over the place? Because by encompassing all things like that, you certainly if you don't have a foothold in one area, and I'm wondering if that how you address that topic.
I think that's the sort of thing that it started out as I say myself. I mean, I'm not particularly interested in theosophy, its explicit tenets and doctrines and so on and so on. I'm in the book, and with her, I'm sort of really, I'm seeing him as part of this cultural evolution as having a major impact. But yes, as you say, a lot of people came out of it, and the reason they left it is precisely for what you're saying. People like P.D. Uspensky, who was early on a major theosophist, a theosophical writer in Russia, in places like Moscow and St. Petersburg, and he lectured in theosophical lodges and so on and so on. But eventually he left because it felt that it didn't have a kind of cohesiveness. It was a bit too mushy. And Rudolf Steiner, he was the most important theosophist on the continent, in Europe. In the early 1900s, and then he eventually left to form his own thing, anthroposophy. So yeah, there is a bit where it's a big umbrella and there's lots of stuff under it, and it's kind of loose and fuzzy and vague and so on and so on. But at the same time, one way is it's because it's that it was the source of so many other things that came out and refined different things from it.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a general sense, I have no argument with its general ideas because they seem to be very basic kind of spiritual sorts of ideas that we're somehow
it's kind of like
we're involved in this cosmic evolution and so on. But when you get into the specifics about the rounds and the root races and all that kind of stuff, well, I tell you the truth, I just don't have time for that. It's a bit too complicated for me, for me to get into and all that. So, but I recognize its importance in what we might call the counter current of Western.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's sort of
philosophical development.
Yeah, it's sort of like going to a spiritual mall of sorts where you've got stalls of people with all selling different ideas, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I actually think people because I firmly believe that true spirituality comes from the individual rather than from an outside force. I think that the more people sort of pick and choose things that they like that fit their own lifestyle and their own belief systems, maybe a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like you're making a recipe. Sure. I think that that's more tangible and more logical and actually it makes the whole sort of spiritual esoteric experience far more unique and genuine to the individual, because you're not following some prescribed tenet. You're not following some sort of liturgy that you have to march along and bow and kneel and pray and everything else. You sort of have your own way of looking. And I think that whatever way it takes for people to get there, as long as they're turning and looking inward as opposed to looking outward, they're going to come to the spot where I think is really the golden nugget that you're trying to get to. You're trying to get to that spot where you understand life, you're happy with it, you're comfortable. And that can only come from self-introspection, I believe, personally. And I think that that's a fairly standard belief of many people, that, the truth really does come from within. You're not going to find it through some icon someplace.
I think that's the first thing Blavatsky herself would say. And she often said, there are many theosophists who don't belong to the Theosophical Society, and there are many people that are members of the Theosophical Society that aren't theosophists. So, you're absolutely right. I mean, she herself, I think she recognized that you have, the broad, the big boat, that lots of people get on, and then there's smaller craft. And she herself, after her scandal, when she spent her last years here in London, she set up her own branch, her own lodge, and then within that there was an esoteric circle, and then within that there was another sort of inner thing too. So in the end, she wound up having a small group of people around her that she taught a very specific thing. But the thing to remember, I think, is there was nothing else like this at the time. And we're in a time when anything you want is available. There's nothing esoteric anymore. I mean, everything is there.
It's true.
Even between the time when I first started reading about this stuff in the mid 1970s and now, even then, lots of stuff was available. But now, you go online, you can find out detailed information about and 20 different people's opinions about it, about practically everything. So it's a different sort of thing now. There's a glut, I think, of it. And I think in many ways you need to develop the art of discrimination. And that one way, that's what I'm trying to do in my books, is I don't want to sound too academic, but it's a kind of comparative esotericism where I'm looking at these different very seminal figures, reintroducing them, and for me, trying to draw out because for me, I think what would be important is to bring all this world into the general conversation about who we are and where we are in the early 21st century, and no longer have it on the margins, but not to say that it's the truth and we should abandon Western science and rationality and so on. Not at all. But I think what we need to do is broaden the standard view we have, and also this stuff to kind of open it up and make it less that you have to
and I think
other ways and join the school. And this is one of the things I do, because I talk to people that are I lecture at the Philosophical Societies, I lecture at the Steiner groups, I lecture to Jungians. I just gave a lecture last night on Jung. I talk to Swedenborgians, so I talk to lots of different sorts of people, and I tell each of them something about the other people, and try to bring it, because we're a different we're a couple generations past this, and it's a different sort of
and
thing.
I think what's important more than anything else is that we elevate the conversation to a point where it does have real value. That's what's most important. So when you're talking about people like Rudolf Steiner or Carl Jung or Madame Blavatsky or Swedenborg, you're actually elevating the conversation to the point where you're not talking about wackos, you're not talking about crackpots, you're talking about people who have really spent lifetimes just delving into this in a very scientific and spiritual and philosophical way, in ways that you may not find the average. I mean, plenty of people know psychics. You go to any town in America or anywhere in the world for that matter, you're going to have somebody who has a sign out there saying card reader, whatever. There are people out there who are immersed in this, but I think that what your books do in particular, I mean, you've written about all these different characters, have brought this dialogue into the modern conventional world where you've contemporized it and made it accessible and palatable to us, to the general public in a way that's, easily understood, as well as picking the right people. I think you really bring you have to elevate the dialogue to where we're talking about credible, logical people. We're not talking about Madam so-and-so down the street. We're talking about real, life-sized, legitimate people who left their mark on the world in very strong and powerful ways.
Well, I think the thing is that, it's ideas. That's what I'm interested in, is the ideas. I mean, I'm open to the possibility of, paranormal phenomena. I've had very powerful synchronicities and things like that. So I'm willing to suspend my disbelief about things. But to me, what's most important is that they're actually ideas that we can discuss rationally, and without having to abandon our reason and just accept some belief. You can actually debate these ideas, how Steiner sees things, how Jung sees things, how Swedenborg sees things, and all these. They each had different experiences on the inner worlds. Steiner looked at the Akashic record, Jung plunged into the unconscious, and brought back the images that we see in the Red Book, and Swedenborg went to heaven and hell, and so on and so on. And they all seem, very different sorts of experiences, but at the same time, there are resonances between them, there are correspondences, and to me, is there a way to develop a kind of map of this general terrain that all of these different figures are going to, this new world they're going to, but they're landing on different parts of it. It's different in Florida than it is in Maine, and it's different in, Baja as it is in Portland or something. So, but it's the same continent, but it's different when you land. So
it is different when you land.
There's a way to, do a phenomenology of what they're all doing and find similarities, and that's the sort of thing I'm interested in trying to do.
And I do think that they do land. I do think that they all have their own approach, much the way traditional religions have their own approach. But if you look at all these traditional religions or any of these approaches, at their core, they do come back to the same basic idea. I think a lot of them do, which is this sort of this brotherhood or whatever you want, this pool of humanity where we do have this great connection to each other. And I think that, probably Jung brought the greatest amount of credibility to it, because he really did see this sort of this divine stretch of humanity where we're all connected in some fascinating way, which I do personally do believe. I do think that anytime someone dies on the planet, we do feel it at some level. I think the same is true for birth. I think we have this great connection. We're just not aware of it. And I think that over the coming years, as we evolve, our ability to tune in on that will be far greater and more enhanced, I think. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and my guest today has been Gary Lockman. We've been talking about Most recently, Madame Blavatsky, his new book, Madame Blavatsky, The Mother of Modern Spirituality. It's available at all your regular book places. It's on Tarcher Penguin Books. Fascinating read. I've been having a great time with this book, as well as I've read many of your other books as well, so I'm familiar with a lot of this stuff. Gary Lockman has written extensively about Carl Jung. He's written about Rudolf Steiner. He's written about Swedenborg. He's written about Ouspensky and Gurdjieff. All of these people are leaders and shakers, movers and shakers of this wonderful sort of esoteric realm of thought, which pushes boundaries and lets us look at life through a different lens. And I think it's important that we are allowed to do that. And that's part of what I try to do with my show here as well, is introduce people, elevate the dialogue, get information, and then form your opinions on that. So it's been a great pleasure, Gary, to have you on. I certainly appreciate you taking the time, and I encourage people to buy your book. It's wonderful. And your website is Gary Lockman, LACHMAN.com. And I'd love...
.co.uk.
.co.uk. I'm sorry.
.co.uk.
.co.uk. I'll have that on my website. I forgot that you're over there in the UK.
Right. Yeah, and, I'm on the other side of the planet. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
I appreciate being on, and it's been a pleasure.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.chrisflisher.com. That's www.chrisflisher.com, or email me, and you can call me at 978-264-0668. Thank you, and as always, be open to possibilities.